As hard as it may be to believe, Sidious actually loved Darth Maul. Darth Sidious is known for simply using people for his own ends, and Maul was of course no different. Yet, despite being just a tool, evidence suggests that Palpatine cared for him greatly. This of course doesn't imply any level of affection or attachment, but it was the Dark Lord's belief that Maul was quite valuable to the Sith Order. Greetings again, lore junkies, and welcome back to the archives. In today's holocron, we're going to provide the accounts that may indicate that Sidious valued and even loved Maul way more than we realized. So now my friends, let's begin. The relationship between Palpatine and Maul is a lot more straightforward than the ones that he had with other individuals, especially his apprentices. But even then, it still had layers of deception and manipulation. Maul was aware of his position as Sidious's instrument. That much was very clear to him, but his future was not. Sidious had no intentions of training a successor, of course, but according to the Journal of Darth Maul, Palpatine indeed raised him in accordance with the rule of two. Sidious gave Maul an actual education in Sith history and lore, but only little bits at a time. The Zabrak warrior knew the origin of the Sith Order, as well as the history of the rule of two itself. He regarded both Ajunta Pal and Darth Bane as geniuses and visionaries. Palpatine walked a very tightrope in his relationship with Maul, especially when Plagueis was still alive. He had Maul believe that he was a true Dark Lord, a partner in Sidious's galactic schemes. This was not entirely true, however. Maul was much less than that to him. And to Darth Plagueis, Sidious had him believe that Maul was nothing more than an assassin, a tool to carry out violent tasks that they could not. But this was not entirely true either. Maul was more than that to Sidious. Sidious was not just raising some animal to be released from a chain. In the future, he would be using beings like Grievous for that. But no, Maul was meant for something greater. Sidious required a weapon that could not be conquered by any Jedi, and so his training was harsh and brutal, even for Rule of Two standards. From the moment Maul began to walk, Sidious began training him to use pain as power. He would starve the boy in his room, allow him to smell his dinner only for the cart to keep on rolling down the hall. Eventually, Maul learned not to cry when he was hungry or uncomfortable. Sidious encouraged Maul to push his limits beyond what a mortal body could achieve, to harness fear and pain and refine it into anger and power. That lesson came when he and a young Maul were training on an icy world, mirroring some of Plagueis' own training methods with Sidious. Palpatine threw the boy into an icy lake. All of the clothes meant to keep him warm now dragged him down as he began drowning in the freezing water. Only by harnessing his fear into anger at his master could he be gifted the power that his limbs would be able to propel him out of the water. Palpatine ensured that his apprentice would feel no fear, and he punished Maul severely anytime he flinched. One notable occasion was an event that would stay with Maul for the rest of his life. When he was a small child, he was taken to a desolate planet for a training exercise. During the event, he was surprised by a venomous lizard known as a dinko. When Maul saw it, he flinched and was sprayed in his eyes with the creature's venom. Through the pain, he managed to crush its head under his boot. He was pleased with his own courage and looked to his master Sidious. However, Sidious mentioned that he had flinched and asked if he was afraid of the small creature. Maul answered that he was, but that he had controlled his fear. However, Maul could sense that his master was displeased with this answer, and he knew that a punishment was coming. Yet that evening he ate his usual meal. He was not confined in a sensory deprivation suit, nor was his bed taken away, and the heat to his chambers was not turned off. All of these were the usual punishments for failure. Eventually, the young Maul forgot about the incident entirely, but then one night, after a particularly exhausting day, Maul returned to his quarters only to be attacked by a dinko. He managed to bat it away, but then another jumped at him, and another. Sidious had filled the room with dinkos and locked the door. They began clawing, biting, and tearing at Maul's flesh, filling him with their venom. Over the course of the entire night, the young Maul managed to kill every single one of them. And at last, the next morning, the door was opened and Sidious stood there in the threshold. When he saw Maul's bloody and swollen body, his only words were, "Do not flinch again." This was the life of a Sith apprentice who was being crafted and molded into the greatest weapon of the generation. The motto he lived by was, "There is no pain where strength lies." But while Sidious harshly punished failure and criticized carelessness, he graciously rewarded Maul's successes as well. He was prone to giving Maul gifts, such as knowledge to construct a saber staff, a rare and a valuable honor for a Sith Lord. The most notable gift he gave his apprentice was the scimitar, the Sith Infiltrator ship. This was an incredibly unique design created by Darth Plagueis' own master, Darth Tenebris. It was the ship used by Darth Plagueis for most of his life, and when Sidious inherited it, he passed it on to Maul just prior to the Battle of Naboo. He was also given to complementing Maul's skill. While he held back on giving him too much praise, he did let Maul know that he was a highly capable and a powerful warrior. Sometimes he would even embellish his talents a bit, just so that Maul would know that he was superior to any Jedi. These were the things that Plagueis was a bit displeased about when he met with Sidious. He warned his apprentice that commending Maul too much would make him arrogant, and unfortunately, Plagueis was absolutely right. Arrogance and pride was a constant issue with Maul, and it would result in his undoing. By taunting and mocking Obi-Wan, he left himself wide open to the Jedi's attack. But despite these drawbacks, Sidious knew what he was doing. This yo-yo of harsh punishment and lavish reward was all for the purpose of capturing Maul's loyalty. Maul's very mind, heart, and spirit were enslaved to Sidious. The only thing that rivaled the apprentice's loyalty was his hatred and bloodthirst for Jedi. He very frequently fantasized about killing them when facing his training droids. Maul's favorite time of day was the sunset of Coruscant, because he enjoyed imagining the scarlet light of the evening as flames rising from the Jedi Temple. Maul pictured himself standing at the epicenter of the temple ruins, Sidious telling him that he had done well. The two loves in Maul's heart often conflicted with one another, however, and there were certain instances when Maul was tempted to disobey his master for the sake of indulging in his thirst. Naboo was not the first time that his pride had caused him problems. He had once disobeyed his master to hunt down a Jedi that was giving them issues, and at the moment that he had them, he decided to taunt and to savor the kill. This allowed time for the Jedi to escape, nearly resulting in the entire exposure of the Rule of Two and the Sith's plan. Luckily for the Sith, Maul was able to hunt them down and kill them in time. But as punishment, Sidious delayed Maul from being able to test himself against a Jedi again, forcing him to wait until the moment he would meet Qui-Gon Jinn on Tatooine. Due to the harshness of his apprentice's life, Sidious had cultivated a fierce and a faithful being. Even the apprentice chided his own thoughts if they bordered on disloyalty to his master. In reality, it's actually very unclear exactly what Darth Sidious's long-term plans actually were for Maul, because as we look deeper into Maul's training years, it's very apparent that Sidious was investing in him for a lengthy future. For instance, Sidious was sensitive about his plans, and rarely divulged them in detail to Maul. However, he did train him not just as a fighter, but as an intellectual as well. He would introduce the bigger picture of their plans to him. He would even teach Maul lessons about manipulation. In Maul's personal journal, he writes about how Sidious tutored him on the subtleties of manipulating the weak, how to target those that were greedy, bend them to their will. The feelings of the powerless did not matter. The feelings of the powerful could be used against them. These kinds of lessons are not given to mindless brutes, but true Sith apprentices. Despite all of this, Sidious later wrote that Sith warriors like Maul were limited in their capacity. They had their uses, but were ultimately unfit for a higher purpose. Most interestingly, in the future, Sidious actually got the best of both worlds with Vader. He was both a warrior and someone who Sidious could depend on to handle bureaucracy. He was the best aspects of Maul and Dooku. But based on what we can tell, Sidious had always had planned on keeping Maul around until Anakin was ready. If Dooku were never a factor, it's likely Sidious may have manipulated any other politician to get the Clone Wars started. Perhaps he could have manipulated Dooku anyway, without taking him on as an official apprentice. Maul would have remained Sidious's primary tool, and we can tell that he had no intentions of disposing of Maul anytime soon, because Sidious was utterly shocked when he heard of Maul's failure on Naboo. Sidious even somewhat mourned his apprentice's perceived death. When Dooku later told him that Qui-Gon's death was never a part of their deal, Sidious coldly mentioned that he too had lost an apprentice. They both had sacrificed something very valuable for the sake of the future. This wasn't just drivel to placate an irritated Dooku. Sidious maintained that Maul was of great value to him even at the time of the Empire. Even in conversations with Lord Vader, the Emperor commented that Dooku was like a ballistic missile to be pointed and shot at a target. But Maul was considered to be a true loss to the Sith cause. This of course makes sense given all the painstaking effort that he put into Maul's training, crafting him into his perfect weapon. I think one of the most overlooked moments in the lore was the conflict within Sidious when he learned that Maul had survived Naboo. This is deeply explored in the Clone Wars comics, but Anakin was the first to inform Palpatine that his apprentice had lived. In the comic, in a rare moment, the mask of Palpatine slips. He is dumbstruck that he was at a complete loss for words, and his disguise nearly faltered. Even though Sidious was fond of trading up in apprentices, he technically did not break the rule of 2 here, and so when Maul had survived, that meant that there were now 3 Sith Lords running around. This was unacceptable. Maul had been replaced. He had outlived his usefulness a decade ago. But now, all of Sidious's intense training could now be used against him, which was an issue of supreme significance. It didn't help that Maul had taken his own apprentice and was building a criminal empire on Mandalore, hence why Sidious went there personally to deal with the matter. He went to Mandalore under the cover of night to take care of what essentially was his own son. Sidious was genuinely impressed with Maul's survival, but he had become a rival. In the end, it only took about 3 minutes for Sidious to butcher Maul's apprentice and wreck his empire. But even here, Sidious does not kill his former apprentice. He continues to save him for his own purposes. After all, none of those years of training and investment should ever go to waste. A lot of Maul's training is overlooked, and as we go through the Journal of Maul and other sources, it is very clear that he was trained far more extensively than many people give him credit for. Maybe not as the perfect rule of 2 apprentice, but certainly more so than he's often portrayed. Maul was educated in Sith philosophy, manipulation, warfare, and Sidious clearly saw long-term potential in him. What ultimately stifled Maul wasn't a lack of training or power, but it was arrogance. Sidious understood this flaw and tolerated it, because he always respected power, even flawed power. In the end, his master Plagueis was absolutely correct. Maul's pride prevented him from ever becoming a truly great Sith Lord, but the potential was always there. But what do you think, my friend? Do you believe we're reaching when we say that Sidious actually cared for Maul? And what do you personally think Sidious's long-term plans were for the Sith Apprentice? As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you too desire more dark side knowledge without the torture, then subscribe. And as always, may the Force be with you.